Hello everybody, welcome back to another video on the ChaddyTheChump channel, and today we are going to be predicting the absolutely stacked Ring Magazine 4 card in Saudi Arabia this weekend. This is arguably one of the best cards of the year, probably, on par with Bivol versus Benavidez 2. That was also a very good card. But this one is very special because the main 4 fights that we're going to be predicting today are all world title fights, which is very good. I love myself a world title fight, but 4 is very special. And they're sort of more unique fighters as well, who some haven't really, they have fought for a world title but they haven't won it before. So it's going to be a very good and interesting card, and we are going to predict it today. So let's get right into it. So the card is headlined by Anthony Yarde versus David Benavidez. Really, I should say the other way round. Benavidez is the champion, and it is for that beautiful golden green WBC belt. Of course, that is, the daddy of all belts. You can say the Ring Magazine, but let's be real. When we picture boxing world titles, we picture the WBC belt. And that's what's on the line. That is the main event. It's kind of a double main event, but the David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde fight is a better one than Devin Haney versus Brian Norman. But both fights are absolutely exceptional. So let's predict Benavidez versus Yarde. It is a great fight. Anthony Yarde described it as a shootout, and I think that's a perfect word to describe it. Both guys looking to take each other's heads off, but also don't want to get hit in the process. And I very much hope the fight is like that, because if it is, then we're in for a good one. I mean, both guys are very entertaining to watch, right? Benavidez, a real special fighter in that light heavyweight scene, who, has faced decent opposition, obviously coming off of a win against David Morrell, which was a great win and a very decisive win. And Anthony Yarde, he has been a little more iffy, right? He has come off a win to Lyndon Arthur, but I'll tell you what, that win wasn't special like, the David Benavidez one. It was quite a, he probably won the fight. He did probably win the fight, but it was very close. And Lyndon Arthur is world level. He's a European champion, which basically means you are world level in my opinion. And he's a great fighter, but he isn't world champion, Lyndon Arthur. And if you go in, life and death with Lyndon Arthur, I guess that's a bit of a bad way to describe it, but it was a close fight. So if you are doing that, then are you really going to beat David Benavidez? I just don't think so, right? And I'm 100% going to be rooting for Anthony Yarde, and I'm desperate for him to prove him wrong, because I want him to bring another world title home to the UK, because we've got 3 right now, especially with Fabio Wally being crowned as a new world champion. So, imagine we get another, it'd be great. I'm rooting for him, but, my heart says Anthony Yarde, my head says David Benavidez, and I am going to go with my head. So I'm going to predict David Benavidez to defeat Anthony Yarde. Now let's talk about the co-main event. Devin Haney taking on Brian Norman Jr. Another great fight, a deserved co-main event for the WBO world title. Devin Haney, of course, coming off of what many people say a boring win against Ramirez, which, yes, you could probably say that. But Brian Norman Jr. won the world title against Sasaki in his last fight by knockout. And Devin Haney says he's won it quite easily, and he isn't really a true world champion. So, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. You know, Brian Norman Jr. obviously good at getting those knockouts. And Devin Haney has been put to the floor. Of course, that was against Ryan Garcia, and that fight was a no contest because of, you know, Ryan Garcia's issues, you know, sort of before the fight and stuff like that. But this is now. Can Devin Haney win the title against Brian Norman Jr.? Or are we just overlooking Brian Norman Jr.? I am not so sure. But my prediction is going to be that Devin Haney does defeat Brian Norman Jr. It might not be the bestest of fights, especially since Norman is just going to try and look to knock him out. I guess, you know, maybe he'll try and box and all that stuff, but the main thing might be just to knock him out. And I think Devin Haney's pretty good at staying defensive. He'll know that he is a target to Norman and will stay defensive and probably win the fight by decision. Now, I am very much looking forward to this next one. Abdullah Mason, rising star, taking on Queensberry boxer Sam Noakes for the WBO vacant world title. Again, a fight that's very interesting. I'm pretty surprised it's a world title fight, but it is a world title fight. And Abdullah Mason looking to become a very, very young world champion. And despite, you know, Sam Noakes obviously being the UK fighter, I am sort of rooting for Abdullah Mason here. I think, you know, I do want prospects to come up in the US as well. And it would be very, very cool for him to win a world title at his age. But can he, right? Sam Noakes has more experience. He'll probably try and take him into sort of deep waters. And Sam Noakes will probably be better to thrive off there from his experience. But is Abdullah Mason just better than Sam Noakes? I mean, Sam Noakes, he is definitely probably the best lightweight in the UK. But does that correspond to the US lightweight division? Of course, a better division. I am going to be predicting that Abdullah Mason does win the world title. What a story. It's going to be a very, very good fight, and I'm looking forward to it. This one will also be a good one. Bam Rodriguez, a very exciting fighter. And, you know, a pound for pound, you know, probably in the top 5 pound for pound in most people's lists, taking on Fernando Martinez. It's another defense for Bam Rodriguez, and to be honest, I think he will easily beat Fernando Martinez. I'd be surprised if he did anything. Of course, Martinez is 18-0, but he hasn't fought level of opposition that Bam has. And you know, Bam is on another level, and he's an exciting fighter to watch as well. It's just great to see him on another undercard, and he also elevates this card to, you know, bigger stature. So Bam Rodriguez wins again and retains his WBO and WBC flyweight titles. And that was my prediction on Ring Magazine for in Saudi Arabia. I think the card is going to be starting at around 9 or 10. What I mean by that is the big sort of 4 fights. I think Abdullah Mason versus Sam Noakes is going to start around, you know, sort of like that time, 9 or 10 UK time. And in the US, it'll probably be, you know, I mean, it depends on where you are, but on the East Coast, probably around 5 or 6 o'clock. So, more fitting to the US market, which makes sense since there are, you know, more US fighters on this card. You know, Bam Rodriguez, Abdullah Mason, Devin Haney, Brian Norman Jr. It does make sense. I do not mind staying up for a card as good as this. So, comment down below your thoughts on this card. What are your predictions? And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.